Hey, everybody. Welcome to the wasmCloud community meeting for February the 17th, 2021. We've got a couple new folks joining us today. Steve, I'll hand it off to you for a quick intro.
Hello. I'm really impressed by the things that you guys are building. I've been playing with Cloudflare workers for a few months and am thinking about some enterprise applications for wasmCloud. So I'm excited to get involved.
That's awesome. And I'm really excited. I know some of the things you're working on with Cloudflare Workers was like an OAuth provider that you've been working through. So I was just really excited when we got a chance to touch base the other day. I think everyone else has been here before. So we've got two quick demos that we're going to walk through. Oh, Wicker's on. Let me actually put you on the spot. Wicker, do you want to take a quick minute and introduce yourself? Or you just, oh, here you are. Good.
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, so Wakar for Wasmer. I am running product management for the company. Recently joined about 2 months ago. Prior to Wasmer, I had my own startup in the edge computing space, primarily focused on integrating highly distributed, I guess legacy systems is the best way that you can call it. The company primarily worked in the defense space where we integrated a bunch of like radar, missile type systems. If you look up the advanced battle management systems for the Air Force, we're a part of that group. I decided to leave that company to join Wasmer because I felt like WebAssembly would have actually made that company much more successful. So that's why I'm here. And then prior to that, I worked at Rackspace in a number of different roles, but I'm mostly a startup guy. So that's me in a nutshell.
Welcome. We're excited to build a very large and inclusive community with wasmCloud. I'm going to go ahead and start with the first demo, and then Brooks, I'll hand off to you. I'm excited. We've been working behind the scenes on branding, and I've got 3 concepts to go through and then to announce our new logos, and we'll get our color palettes and all that stuff in flight for all the work we've got on documentation and websites. So Kevin and I worked pretty closely on the planning on this, and we worked with an incredible shop out of Austin called Legacy 79. Juan down there is phenomenal if you ever need work like this. He's really intentional. And the first concept was interlocking pieces plus portability plus the W monogram, and we came up with this, which obviously evokes a W, a bit of a box if you look at it right, both inward and outward. And then there it is mocked up in green. Option 2 was to think through interlocking pieces. And if you know me, you know that I love my hexagons, clouds and systems working together. And this was a set of hexagons that evoke the cloud logo. You know, when you were looking at, like the classic little cloud sketch there, mocked up in a few different colors here. And then the third option that we kind of worked through was the idea of scalability plus pre-built modules and bits of information. And that was wasmCloud like this. And here it is mocked up in a few different colors. And we got some feedback from a couple different folks, and we've decided to go with the W a logo here. So assets will be put up onto Slack and distributed up through GitHub, hopefully today, so we can start integrating those. And we did experiment with a few different color schemes here. Ultimately, when we went back to color theory, we really wanted to communicate something that was calm and, collected. So we were thinking the greens and the blues. And after a quick discussion, we ended up selecting the green as our sort of standard color palette. So we'll get some colors out to folks here in logos over the next couple days, and we can start, branding all the things. It'll certainly be less painful than another name change, which if you've been with the product or the project for a while, you know that we started as Waxosuit, a brief tour of duty as Waska, then Wask, and then finally our forever home with wasmCloud. Any questions about branding or the sort of concepts here?
I have one, Liam. It's Jordan. So we've been, when typing out wasmCloud in a lot of places, we've been capitalizing the C. From now on, are we going to go with the lowercase c?
That is a great question. I had always kind of thought I liked the using the capital C because then even in plain text, like you see up here at the top, you get the emphasis and the sort of carry around with the words. Let me talk to Juan and just ask as a suggestion what his thoughts are on that. We could as a brand guide, just whenever it's written, we use wasmCloud with a C, but whenever it's our logo mark here, where you can carry the emphasis, that we just go this way. I'm ultimately open to feedback on this from everybody. If anyone has any ideas.
Of course, if you want to avoid Clippy errors, you would have to capitalize the C.
Yeah, if we want to avoid Clippy errors, yeah, maybe. If we get it all in our default dictionaries, I've added it to mine so that it auto corrects. Ralph, any thoughts? Or the Microsoft folks, you guys had some awesome ideas on taglines and some of the branding stuff we worked on or we discussed last week.
I don't know. I'm sick to death with camel casing, but it serves a purpose as you kind of laid out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I actually like it as laid out here. It's the thing about the camel casing in branding and logoing now is that it very much smells like, to me, it smells like Yahoo. It's the same kind of thing. It's like, in 10 years from now, you're going to sit there and go, God, I really wish that C was lowercase. But, I wouldn't say that that's a strong case because I think from your point too, is just as good, which is typographically, it sort of calls it out as not being a sort of a one word kind of genericized thing. It's not like, it doesn't make it Xeroxy right away.
Yeah.
So 6 of one, half dozen the other for me.
I'll ask Juan to do the logo both ways, and we can then kind of look at it side by side, and then we can make a decision. Kevin, what are your thoughts?
I was just saying, when I look at the logo the way they are now, where you can sort of see that WASM is a little bit bold and Cloud is not. I actually prefer that to camel casing. I'm with Ralph on the idea that camel casing has been done to death.
So what about for our written marks? Do you think it should all be lowercase then, as the written mark for like when we're using it in text and writing?
I don't really have a strong opinion there. I do know that having the capital C in some of the things that we've been doing, GitHub wise, that's actually caused technical problems.
I know we had a routing issue the other day with what crates.io wouldn't route, failed if you tried to pass it to the capital versus the lowercase or something like that.
Yeah, I don't remember what the exact issue was, but I know every once in a while we run into something that doesn't like the capital C.
Yeah.
But other than that, I really don't have any strong opinion on what it looks like written out in text. And I do prefer the logos the way they are.
Okay, well, I think if we have we certainly don't want a brand standard to be a barrier to any technical functionality of the project. So I think I'm inclined to say that now that we have the nice logos, we can just use those when we need to, and we lowercase. But we can talk to this more on Slack and just sort of move through that. But that was a great point there. Let me go ahead and pass it off to you, Brooks. You've got a walkthrough you wanted to do?
I think we were going to err on the side of announcing the releases for today.
Okay. Do you want to pull up and share your screen and walk through those?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that as well.
That'd be awesome.
So everybody should be able to see my screen, and now we're on a GitHub Releases page. I'm proud to announce that we have released wasmCloud v.15. So all of the assets that we released for with everything with the wasmCloud host, with v.15, we released Wash version 2.0, which is like our milestone release, and had, I pointed out in the Slack channel, we had contributions from many people, including Jared and Gustav. Both thank you for contributing to this. All of this has been released with our CI/CD GitHub actions. So, releasing in the future is going to be much, much easier. Across the board, we've improved our documentation in not only just on wasmCloud, but .dev, but we also have better READMEs for actor interfaces, for example. We have automatically updating versions for each interface, regardless of language. For capability providers, we also have an auto-updating list of our first-party capability providers and their OCI references to keep it easy for anybody to be able to run their own examples. And same with our example actors. There's a PR out there right now that opens up a table with OCI references for all of our example actors. So across the board, we have released all of the work that we've been doing over the past few months. And I mean, personally, it feels like a huge weight off the chest to get this out there. But we now have wasmCloud and Wash installable for Deb and RPM through Brew for macOS. And of course, you can also still install it with like cloning it or installing it through crates.io. So really happy to announce that. Yeah, hold on, we'll do a little festive emoji.
All right, that is awesome, Brooks and Kevin and Bill and everybody, Jared, everybody that's been busting their butts the last few months. This has been such a massive release. Brooks, if you could just paste all those links into chat, I'll make sure they end up in the, or just add them to the notes directly. I will go ahead and make sure that shows up. We've still got a lot of work to do here on, documentation and storytelling and, building out some of the examples and still some of the actor interfaces, but there's no doubt that this has just been a real labor of love for the last few months to get this over the hill. So I hope everybody certainly feels proud, and we will do a formal, team celebration here in the next few weeks. I just need to get the form into Slack, and we'll let folks start signing up, and we'll block out some time just to sit around and hang out and just commemorate all the hard work and everything. Just some quick community announcements. May the 4th, we have a Cloud Native WASM Day. The CFP closes on Friday. So if you would like to get a talk in, the sort of theme is WASM at the intersection of, Cloud Native is what we're trying to work through there. So those proposals lining up to that or theme to that would be preferred. There's also the WebAssembly Summit, which is being put on by Fastly, April 22nd, 2021. The CFP for that is closed. And then we've got the WASM Time biweekly meeting next week at 1 o'clock on Thursday. If anybody is looking for an invite for that, I can slide one your way. And unfortunately, I hope everybody got their Valentine's Day gift of the early bird KubeCon WASM Day registration special for $10. It is now up to normal price, but still discounted from final price. So make sure you get set up for KubeCon EU. For those on the East Coast, that'll be starting at something like 3 a.m. Most days. I will be blocked out and engaged very heavily in the WASM Day stuff, as well as some of the KubeCon activities. We're trying to get more WASM into the schedule wherever we can. And I just do an open call. Does anybody else have any community motions or meetings that they'd like to raise at this time? Any call outs? Okay, I think just Brooks, you already kind of reviewed the in-flight actor interfaces. There's still a handful of these left to be written in various languages here. Speaking of my dictionary there. So thank you very much for the table, and these are all laid out as well. I know we're looking for help on that. The REPL, Brooks, this is all tidied up for 2.0. This is done, right?
Yep, it's tidied up for 2.0. There are a couple issues in the backlog here. They're all marked for like an ephemeral 3.0 release, which is just in the future once we get enough features, or break the API in a way that warrants a minor version release. So I guess one thing we can point out on wasmCloud and on the Wash, like in the main repo README, we now have a badge that shows how many issues are marked as good first issue. And we're trying to keep up with that to make sure that, you know, we can easily show what's available for people to hop in and get working on. So that's a great place to look if you're looking to get involved.
Great. And I know we've had a bunch of discussions privately on this, but you know, when we're trying to build a big community, there is a lot of behaviors that you need to adopt around, you know, documentation and welcoming and inviting. And this is part of that effort to lay some things out. Let's see, Taylor, are you on? Radu, I'm not sure, or Matt, does somebody, how are we on the Crustlet wasmCloud provider? This is all wrapped up?
It's moved over. I haven't updated it to all the new versions yet. Don't ask me about updating versions right now. I'm still in the midst of doing Tokyo upgrades on the main Crustlet repo, so I'm going to be stuck doing that for a little while. But it will come there. It builds. It builds and it does what it's supposed to. It's not using the new versions yet. So it's everything that it currently is in Crustlet 0.6, just been moved over.
Okay, great. Is there, you know, from a how do we support you, you know, perspective? Are there any calls to action you want to make or asks, you know, that you need?
No, there's no asks here. If someone is feeling so inclined, they can go through and try to update the libraries to the proper versions. But I mean, I don't know how difficult that is based on our current version where we're at, but that should allow you to update those things. You should be able to update those things right now. Otherwise, I think everything is ready to go there. There's a build pipeline set up. It builds the artifacts. The artifacts are available in each pipeline run. Once you do get a artifact storage location that isn't GitHub, then just let us know and we'll update that.
Okay.
But yeah, the idea to have it there is that if there's any other experiments you want to try with it that were kind of hard to do while it was still within the main Crustlet repo, that's one of the things that having it over here enables. So if you want to, I don't know, mess around with lattice stuff with it, or, you know, like any of those kind of like other features that were kind of hard to shove into the normal, it's now out of the Crustlet repo so that it's easier to do that than having it all intermeshed and entangled with the rest. So anyway, I guess the big help is just if someone wants to go update those libraries because they know the APIs pretty well, then that'd be great. But otherwise, I'll get to it eventually.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for all the hard work on that. And then let's see, I think I'd almost want to just do a call out and ask if anyone else has anything they want to raise or discuss.
So there was some confusion on how Wash is supposed to act with regards to NATs and wasmCloud host that was deferred to today. I want to make sure that Brooks and Kevin, you guys can ask me any questions if there are still any.
Awesome. And this is the it's I had actually had this teed up for after I did that ask, so that was like I couldn't have set you up, could have planted a better question, by the way. So this is the tutorial that you were trying to follow, is that right?
Yeah, I was just going through step by step,
Okay.
trying to blindly copy and paste things, see how they worked, and they didn't. And after troubleshooting, it didn't look like it was my environment. And then we got to some confusion as to what the expectation actually was with Wash.
Got it. And this was what we attracted to was not having NATs running. That's correct. And the fix was to for you to just use the Docker Compose file that's in the tools directory and spin that up. Is that did I recount that correctly?
Oh yeah, I can get all these commands working myself when running my own hosts and setting nats up. But as for the documentation, it didn't mention nats, didn't really mention much about wasmCloud hosts at that point, and Wash didn't seem to work well like that. So either the documentation needs to be adjusted, or Wash needs to have that functionality.
No, I think there's probably two call outs here. One, first, I know that privately I've asked, Steve, we were talking to you the other day. I mean, Jared, Jordan, anybody that's going through a tutorial, your feedback, like what we're getting now, is absolutely priceless, because when we're going through these things, like it's easy to forget that, oh, I already have Nats running. And so that we don't make the same errors because we're bringing so much baggage and context to it. So I want to let you know how important your contributions are and how grateful we are to receive them. Anytime you're, kind of doing anything, if you keep a little, a little notepad next to you and just write down your thoughts and experience, and please try to share those with us. That's, really, really amazing. At some point, I'd love to get to, like the Steve Krug style, don't make me think, usability studies and testing, but we know that we still have a bunch of, rough surfaces to polish down here. Oh God, it's the Pinewood Derby this weekend. I have so much work to do. Speaking of polishing things down. So I really appreciate it. And Brooks, did you want to talk about what you were kind of planning here after post discussion on this?
Yeah, I'd love to. So yeah, again, echoing what Liam is saying, like, thank you for running through this, especially doing the tedious part of like copying, pasting every command, like in a fresh environment. Because like Liam said, that stuff is easy to forget. So I wanted to share two things. Do you mind if I just share my screen real quick, Liam?
Of course not, Brooks. I would love that, actually.
So the first thing that we did, just to solve or at least add some context immediately, this is in Wash 2.0. So like installing the latest version of Wash, you'll get this. I just launched a REPL without running nats, and previously you got an error message saying that it was running without a host, which is like technically possible for wasmCloud, and this is a feature that we're going to be working on to run like only a local host without nats. But for now, while that's not implemented, I've added a little bit more verbosity here to the error message, directly stating that there was a problem connecting to nats and then linking directly to our documentation, which is something that's great to be able to do now, saying specifically what nats is required for. So here, like if you're in the REPL, you can still do some commands without nats. So for example, like you could examine the echo KV or the echo actor, and that's totally fine without nats, but you can't run the control interface commands, which are really important for the tutorials. So what I just wanted to point out there is that the first step to addressing this is to at least like stop it at the source, where somebody would run into that confusion. And I think the next step, like coming along with all feedback that we can get, is to address it in our documentation, make sure we mention it right at the beginning of the creating an actor tutorial and pointing to the right place. So any feedback that anybody has there for something that stops them in the documentation, something that's just like not quite working right, definitely bring it up, because we can address it. And if you're having the problem, then other people are going to have the problem too.
Yeah, and I would really encourage feedback any way possible. Pull request, Twitter, all the things are great. Kevin, there's a issue that we're kind of talking through here. It was in an old version of in an earlier version about having two different code paths here for running local only or running with nats. Do you kind of want to share your perspective on that, and what was the experience when we had that previously, and kind of what your lessons learned was?
Yeah, so basically in the previous code base, the stuff that existed prior to o.15, we had a bunch of code that would detect if you were running without nats, and there would essentially be all of these shortcut paths through the code. And if you were running Nats, then there would be all of these legitimate paths through the code. And the problem was that it became impossible to test, and we had too many different edge cases that, to manage. And so, among other things, that was one of the things that we rewrote. And so now you can run without Lattice, but our code only takes one path through the Lattice system. So one of the things that we're looking at doing in terms of making this experience better is, so today, now that we've got the little fix in for Wash 0.2, it gives you the error message saying that Nats is required. But what we might be able to do in the fairly near future is fall back to some form of public access to Nats. So we could potentially use the demo.nats.io URL, and for a short period of time, your stuff will work on, on that public demo access point. So we could still warn you that you need Nats, but it no longer becomes this all or nothing thing where, we could potentially fall back to that if you don't have Nats running locally. Another option is we might be able to do something with NGS, which is Synadia's public hosted Nats servers. And so what we might have is maybe some form of limited user account that will connect to NGS. And so if you don't have Nats running, then you'll essentially connect to a lattice of some shape. And but as you can imagine, the devil is in the details on that one. So there's a lot of stuff to work out before we throw that in there. But in general, the idea is we want to make sure that the developer experience just keeps getting better. So today, we're getting better about both documenting and requiring in the tooling that Nats is there. And then once we get to whatever the release is going to be for that, we should be able to make that experience even smoother.
Kevin, I thought we talked through, and I recount these conversations, but I'd kind of like to just summarize them with other people here on some of the other options here and some of the challenges. First, where does Nats run today versus where wasmCloud runs, and we're sort of like the directionality there. And maybe could we start with a summary of that?
I'm not sure what you mean by where does Nats run.
What packages are built, what hosts are supported. It's like all the ARM stuff out there. I thought there was a concern around that the packaging wasn't wasn't prepared.
There's no like brew installable version of Nats, and there's no APT or snap package for Nats that I know of, but it's just stupid simple to compile. So Nats will basically run anywhere you can download, anywhere you can compile Go, and their release binaries are available for all the major operating systems.
Okay, so it's a matter of the packaging just isn't prepared to make the user experience as frictionless as we would like it to be, to just start auto installing as a dependency or something, right?
No, it's not really that. It's just that if we were to attempt to make Nats a prerequisite of one of our own installations, then we are now tightly coupled to how Nats updates and manages its release packaging. And we don't want to be in that business. So we're deliberately not bundling Nats with our own installation binaries.
And that was going to be my next question. Was that exact question? That's great. Now, a new idea that I had not really heard you offer or discuss before was the concept of maybe having like some limited use public, network available for use or testing or something. That's super interesting. We should maybe kind of bounce that around a bit and see if there's something that we can do to make the experience better. Do we do it?
Yeah, like I said, there's a couple of possibilities there, and some of them might make for some pretty cool developer experiences. We just need to, go through and see what the edge cases are, and
Yeah.
you know, hopefully do it without it ending up costing us a ton of money every time somebody accidentally opens Wash without a NATS client installed or without a NATS server running nearby.
Yeah, no, understood entirely.
I think an additional thing for us to think of, we've been focusing really hard on the initial developer experience. So like the very first time somebody uses wasmCloud and gets up and running, how easy is it for them to do that? Another experience that we can start thinking about too is, how do you go from being on your local machine running wasmCloud to being on like a server or some other type of edge infrastructure, somewhere that's not your local machine? So in a way, I think that having the NATS requirement, if that's something that's going to happen on the server side anyways, might as well happen immediately so that you know what to expect. So if we do like a global or like a fallback, I think the key thing is going to be communicating that really well so that people know what they have to do to move their wasmCloud things from local to somewhere else.
Okay, super interesting. And then there's, probably some other work around, thinking about the really tiny things where space is at a premium and, like recommendations. But I guess stuff all down the road as we kind of think through that for, is it too early to say .16, Kevin? You don't want to hear it?
It's way too early to say .16, but yeah, I mean,
For
NATS is super tiny. NATS is a super tiny binary, and it uses almost no memory. And it's one of those things where if you look at big complicated infrastructure and distributed systems, the NATS process is the one thing that just never dies for any reason. So I'm not really concerned with NATS's size, and if a device ends up being too small to even run NATS, then we need to figure out whether that's a device. In other words, if a device is too small to run NATS, we need to make a decision as to whether it's too small to run wasmCloud at all.
Okay.
And then after we make that decision, we can figure out whether, like, there are architectural patterns where you don't have to deploy NATS physically on the same machine or the same virtual device where your wasmCloud host is. You can connect remotely to it.
Yeah.
NATS also supports MQTT. So one of the other patterns that NATS enables is in situations like that is you've got wasmCloud running on your IoT device, and then you use MQTT to talk to your NATS gateway or bridge or leaf node or however you set that up.
Got it. Okay, so definitely some really solid options there across the board to think through from a both technology and user experience point of view. So I believe that's everything that we had on the agenda for today for discussion-wise. I know there's a bunch of tests still going through Slack. Open floor. Does anyone have anything that they want to bring up on the call today?
I'd love to call to action. Our tutorials, documentation, and our artifacts are out there now. So if you're interested in playing with wasmCloud or Wash or any of the tutorials that we have written, now is the time. And it would also be super valuable to us if you have any comments about the experience along the way.
Okay, awesome. And, for the folks that were new on the call today, Wicker, Steve, I would ask, do you guys have any questions you'd want to just ask while everybody's all together? Anything like, I know that we're covering a lot of ground today, and there's probably a bunch of assumptions around what people understand and what they don't. Is that stuff you'd want to chat through now or take it offline later?
So for me, I'm just listening and processing, so I don't really have any intelligent questions that I can ask right now.
Hey, like that, I don't like the qualification that we can only ask intelligent questions. Otherwise, I would have to keep my mouth shut the entire call. I don't just play the rube on the call, Wicker. It's not just an act I put on to just ask the next dumb question. Like it's actually real. But it's super handy because every epic story, they always have to give you the character that like, brings along and gives you the context, and always ask the questions like, like the sidekick. So, it's a good role for me to play. Steve, how about you?
Well, I have a follow-up from the previous discussion. I thought that when you're sending messages between actors in the same host, and by host I mean the wasmCloud host, that it didn't use NATs.
That is correct.
So wouldn't that be a pass for small devices that can't fit NATs? They could still run a wasmCloud with in-process actors?
Yeah, so we were talking, the discussion earlier was kind of specifically around the wash REPL and being able to interact with a host through it. And so it's not an issue, but the requirement of the wash REPL to be able to remotely control a wasmCloud host is that it needs to have access to the Lattice control interface, and the Lattice control interface is NATs. So if you want to use the REPL to talk to and manipulate a host, you need NATs. But if you want to just deploy a wasmCloud host that's running an actor that talks to a capability provider, like one of the IoT demos that we have is the capability provider is an LED controller, and the actor is changing the LED pattern over time. That requires no NATs whatsoever.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Also, a couple of things that I'm thinking about working on. If anybody's already started it, I'd love to connect over Slack. One is a policy provider with Open Policy Agent, and the other is possibly using Envoy as a service gateway.
Yeah, so we actually have an issue in the backlog for the OPA integration. The wasmCloud has a pluggable trait called an authorizer. And so the integration with OPA would essentially be creating an authorizer that defers the can load and can execute decisions to whatever OPA decides. And one of the cool things about OPA is that you can send in the header a bearer token that is a JSON web token. So you can send the actor's credentials as a bearer token to OPA, and that'll give OPA access to things like the issuer and the public keys and all of the claims that that module has. So we can make some pretty robust decisions from there.
Kevin, real quick, is this the correct issue here, number 72?
Nope.
The authorizer trait should include target claims?
No.
No. Okay.
Just search for Open Policy Agent or OPA.
Great, thanks.
Nope, not that one either. The phrase is implement an authorizer. So if you search for the word authorizer, it should show up with an E.
Authorizer should include target claims.
Oh, okay. So we have one for NAT server. I thought we had an issue in the backlog for the OPA one. I'll take a look and see if maybe it's sitting in another repo or something like that. But
yeah, I know I saw it somewhere. Yeah. I thought it was here. But
if we have somehow lost that issue in one of the rewrites, then we'll just recreate it today, because that's definitely one of the. It was a fairly high priority for us before the rewrite, and so it's still.
Steve, would I love where you're interested in the problem space. Is is a quick brain dump from Kevin and an issue the right way to help empower you to explore the issue further, or how can we help pull you into the community?
Well, I want to do some more poking around so that I can figure out what the right questions are.
Okay. All right, great. Well, I'll leave the follow-up to that one on Slack, Kevin. But if you could help me find that issue and I just get in the notes and call it out to Steve when we find it, that'd be awesome.
Yeah,
But
like
great.
I said, if I don't find it, I'll just create it.
Super. Great question, by the way, Steve. What else were you interested in exploring? I'm afraid I cut you off there when we went down the little OPA rabbit hole. Was there another topic you were looking into?
Oh, well, I was thinking about Envoy as a gateway, sort of to collect say API hits from the larger internet, and then route them into the wasmCloud. Is anybody doing that, or what's the technique du jour for that component?
Well, so most of wasmCloud isn't at the Envoy type level. So the cloud itself doesn't make any demands on the type of network interface that's used in order to interact with the actors. So you can make direct calls to an actor over the lattice. If an actor is bound to an HTTP server, then there's an HTTP endpoint that you can use to get to an actor. But whatever you want to sit in front of a lattice is entirely up to you. So we don't have anyone working on it, but there's also nothing preventing anybody from putting any form of proxy in front of the lattice. One of the types of proxies that we are actually planning on building, and I'm hoping to get to this one fairly soon, is an open FAS gateway. So we'll be able to treat a wasmCloud lattice as an open FAS provider. And so then when someone makes a function invocation using the open FAS REST API, it'll go through our capability provider and then use Lattice to invoke that actor directly.
Okay.
That's great. Great question, Steve. Anything else on your mind?
I'm good, thanks.
Thank you. We're excited to continue to discover and find people that share our enthusiasm for the problem space and how we're trying to move forward together. So thank you. Well, I guess last open call, and we can stop recording. And as always, we can hang out for a little bit and just chit chat if people are interested. Anyone else have anything they wanted to raise today? Okay, I'll go ahead and pause, stop recording, and we can just move into the social part of the call.